Our first major initiative, it is, as we have announced today, for Australia to achieve a nuclear-powered submarine fleet. Not a nuclear-armed, a nuclear-powered. This is a one-off, as the President in Washington has made very clear. This is a very special arrangement and a very important one for Australia.
It's just 20 days since Scott Morrison announced one of the most profound shifts ever in Australia's defence and strategic policy. At its heart, we were dumping a deal to build French submarines and committing to American and British nuclear submarines, as well as signalling an escalating build-up in American military arms and personnel on Australian shores. The move was, by and large, widely endorsed.
It's very clear that the next generation technology, in terms of nuclear-powered submarines, has very clear advantages.
Strategically, though, the message was perhaps even more important. It was a clear signal to China that Australia was putting itself more aggressively in the firing line in any future conflict in the Pacific.
If Australia is interested in not just defending Australia, but going off and defending Vietnam, Philippines, Taiwan, then nuclear submarines would have that advantage. So if what you're really interested in is just defending your coastline, the analysis might say that conventional submarines provide more defence.
But in the 20 days since the announcement, things have not gone well for the AUKUS agreement. First, there was the outrage of the French who accused Australia of duplicity and the impression that left on the global stage that our country was not to be trusted. That was just the start of the problems, though. The Biden administration has been desperately trying to build bridges with the French.
Vous avez compris la colère des Français?
Mais oui, absolument. And President Biden asked me about it. He literally had not been aware of what had transpired, and I don't want to go into the details of it, but suffice it to say that the president, my president, is very committed to strengthening the relationship and making sure that this is a small event of the past.
At home, the criticism started with three former Prime Ministers, Paul Keating, Kevin Rudd and Malcolm Turnbull, who have all questioned different strategic ramifications of the deal. Now, two more former PMs from the more conservative end of politics have spoken out, John Howard and Tony Abbott. They are supportive of the AUKUS idea and of nuclear subs for Australia, but argue we should lease some in the next 20 years to cover a gap. The only problem is there's none to go around.
The issue there is neither the UK or the US has submarines sitting around that they're not using that are in good condition that they could simply hand over to us.
It's not just former Prime Ministers expressing concerns. Senior political, diplomatic and military analysts have all raised some questions about the shift in policy and how it would come about. Even foreign affairs commentators like the Australian's Greg Sheridan.
All that has happened so far is that we have killed our conventional submarines. Now, the government still says it's going to construct these submarines, these nuclear submarines, in Adelaide. Now, the Americans take 7 years to build a Virginian. The Brits take 10 years to build an Astute, and they know what they're doing.
With enough lead time, yes, it's possible. It would probably make sense for the first one or two to be built substantially offshore.
I believe we can play a major role. I'm not quite sure what that would be at the moment. It causes me great grief that we've declined in terms of our manufacturing capacity.
Beyond the questions of whether Australia can realistically build nuclear boats, there is the problem of a possibly decades-long gap in submarine capability and the question of how to fill it. If there are no submarines to lease, could we perhaps buy one from the US?
My understanding is that US shipyards are at capacity at the moment, and there have been discussions about the US expanding its own fleet of submarines by buying them at a little faster clip. And the word is that no, that's not possible anytime soon.
In terms of gaps, don't forget that it was always intended, and indeed it was inevitable, that we would need to have a full life refit of the Collins from 2026 on. Yes, they won't be ideal, but we will have a submarine capability at a reduced level through to the 40s.
Of course, the big problem with this is domestic politics. Adelaide has been promised a huge submarine build.
I think all of us should be clear and say we need to separate defence policy from industry policy. There'll be plenty of jobs and plenty of employment with the challenges coming at Australia.
And then there is the issue of nuclear proliferation and the implications of the AUKUS deal for US strategic interests. 7:30 can reveal a group of eminent former ambassadors, regulators, presidential advisors, scientists and academics in the field of nuclear arms control have today written to President Biden, saying the AUKUS deal poses a risk to not just nuclear non-proliferation, but to US national security because of the amount of weapons-grade or highly enriched uranium that would have to be exported.
And here, under this deal, the US would export for every submarine a half a ton of bomb-grade uranium, enough for 20 nuclear weapons per sub. If Australia can have HEU, then every other country will demand the same thing, whether it's Iran or South Korea or Saudi Arabia or Turkey or Vietnam.
Professor Cooperman also questions the idea that the submarines Australia wants need to be powered by weapons-grade uranium, or HEU, rather than low-enriched uranium, or LEU.
It appears, we have to do the research, but it appears it would be possible. So this argument that, well, you need bomb-grade uranium because that's the only way to avoid refueling, that is a red herring. That is not correct.
The government has 18 months to consider all these questions, well beyond the next federal election.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.